So China is apparently pretty close to passing the United States as becoming probably the most influential country on the planet. And there's going to be a lot of things that determine this going forward over the next few years. But this is something that I think the US government finally needs to address. I feel like people in the United States have felt way too secure about stuff like this for way too long. Because especially ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States has been the world's sole superpower. There has been pretty much nobody else that can contest the United States in virtually anything. America's been the most influential country in the world. They've had the strongest military in the world, the strongest economy in the world. And it's gotten to this point now with the rapid expansion of China over the last few decades, and especially now due to the pandemic, there's a pretty seismic shift that's been going on that's about to finally peak out. And within the next 10 to 20 years, it's becoming more and more apparent that the United States is probably going to lose its position as the biggest economy to China. So this discussion really has been started by an article I saw through CNN Business today, which I know is going to disqualify what I'm saying to a lot of people, but I think it's important that people honestly listen this time around because this is actually one of the things I've read from CNN that I personally do agree with. But this article is called "China is Rehearsing for When It Overtakes America," okay? Which, when you look at the political spectrum, China is already basically beefing with the United States. I mean, with all the trade things that have been going on over the last few years, especially during the Trump presidency, it seems like the relations between China and the United States got worse, but China has been building up for so long, and they have such massive advantages on the United States. They already know that within the next few decades, there's a very good chance that they're going to overtake the United States, and they're going to be more influential on the world stage. Now, I want to also keep in mind here that if China overtook the United States, it's not going to be like the US becomes a third world country tomorrow. We wouldn't be able to do anything. I mean, it would be just basically that the US would be second best in a lot of these elements in terms of possible influence and economy and things like that. Now, a big reason that this is all kind of falling into cards right now is because of COVID. I mean, that's, as crazy as it sounds to say, that's going to be a big factor in both countries going forward and how long it's going to take for this all to kind of fall together. I mean, eventually, I think it's probably going to end up happening. China's going to have a bigger economy than the US. I mean, their country's 4 times the size of ours in terms of population. They're rapidly industrializing. It's becoming more and more urban, things like that, right? So with COVID coming, obviously it started in China, in Wuhan. That's when the first cases of this were really discovered, and this became a problem. The first travelers or whatever that ended up getting it and passing it in other countries, they were mostly from Wuhan. So China was kind of I guess, given the advantage of that, right? Because they got to, I guess, they got to start their planning for COVID way earlier than everyone else, because obviously it's starting there is different than it's starting in the United States and then coming there, because they have to address it first. The United States, I don't think, really started widely doing anything about COVID until late February, early March. I mean, there wasn't much done before that stopped the pandemic, obviously, because the United States has been hit pretty much the hardest. So while China had to deal with the initial effects, I guess, of COVID on their economy, they got to get working again a lot earlier. China has basically claimed that it's beaten COVID and that, they don't really have to deal with it anymore, and that's why they're back open and everything again. But I'm going to be honest, I really have always kind of doubted the numbers China gave when it came to COVID. I just don't see how a country that has 4 times the population, people are so densely packed in these areas and whatnot, in these cities of just ridiculous populations, and there being just the amount of cases that they said. Maybe it is true. Maybe their government did act way better than the United States' did, and they locked this whole thing down better. I'm not sure. It wouldn't surprise me, considering that the Chinese government is essentially a communist regime, and they can kind of just do whatever they want at any time and restrict human rights at any time, and nothing can really be done about it. But obviously here in the United States, people are much more centralized, individually around on their freedoms and stuff like that, so people really rebelled against that. But that's a big thing, because obviously the United States, we're still not even out of the issue here, right? We still have COVID widespread in the United States. The economy is still reaping the effects of COVID. I'm pretty sure the jobs reports actually went negative in December for the first time since April. So, you're looking at a country that is still a year later now dealing with this pandemic on a widespread level. There's still lockdowns in certain places in Europe and in the United States. There's still all the social distancing. There's still all these problems going on that are being used to try and deal with the pandemic, but they're still going on here. They're not going on in China because they've quote-unquote defeated the virus. So they now have an economic head start because they can get their factories and their stores and stuff running up faster. and at better capacity than they can here in the United States because of restrictions, and all of their companies now are getting to a point, right, where like all their sales hits and everything were already dealt with. And in the United States, you know, some companies are still dealing with that fallout. A lot of industries are still really harsh hit. I mean, you know, a lot of the leisure and the activities and stuff in the United States, they're still either at like 20% capacity or like they can't even operate right now, things like that. That's not necessarily going on as much over in China, which means that depending on how long this whole COVID thing really lasts here in the United States, they could realistically have like a 1.5 to 2 year head start, economically added on to the momentum they've been building up for decades. And this is kind of something that's been considered even by people who work in politics, as a matter of fact. In fact, Francois Huang, which is a senior economist for the Asia Pacific at Euler Hermes, I'm pretty sure I bodied the name, but filed a report last week titled "The World is Moving East Fast," and detailed how China, which is emerging from COVID shock earlier than the rest of the world, already has their authorities planning for the long term. Basically meaning that the Chinese government is at a point where they realize like, hey, the United States kind of fucked up. Their economy is kind of weak right now, but we're doing okay because we got through this earlier. Let's use this as an opportunity to try and get more influence on the global stage. Let's use this as an opportunity to get ourselves back in, you know, a lot faster, build ourselves up even more to compete against the United States long term. As a matter of fact, China also just outpaced the United States in foreign direct investment for the first time. Now, basically, this is saying that foreign companies are investing into China more than they're investing into the United States for the first time ever. I mean, for decades now, when you're thinking of like, where do we want to invest in economically to get the best return for ourselves? It's pretty much always the United States. It's got a huge population, you know, the whole capitalism thing pretty much gives you infinite room to scale. The mindset in America is very consumeristic, if that's even a word. You know, it's just in the culture of the United States is about making money at the end of the day, realistically. That's always been the place to go, but China is now such an influence economically, and with things like cheaper labor and less restrictions to work with, China's been a place that companies are flooding to. Even United States, like we've been dealing with this for like a decade and a half now. At least ever since I've been growing up, I've been hearing about presidential candidates talking about, oh, we're going to get our jobs back to America from China. Or we're going to stop American companies from moving overseas. Like, you know, globalization has been an issue. And for the first time ever, we're now kind of seeing the direct effects of that. And on top of that, China also just signed a trade agreement with the European Union to basically try to boost growth for economies, and also would give European companies greater access to the Chinese consumers, which is almost 1.5 billion people. Now, from what I'm understanding here, the reason that China has been able to jump off so much ever since this all happened and kind of rebuild and get its economy going in record speed, realistically, is because, first off, they had the harsh quarantine measures. You know, you saw the videos in China that looked like they were out of a sci-fi movie where people were literally being pulled out of their cars and tested mandatorily to even pass out of the city limits. There's big dirt piles blocking the streets out and stuff like that. But those kind of quarantine measures apparently helped stop the pandemic a lot quicker, and they also built up additional actions to try to spur economic growth. As a matter of fact, the country funded major infrastructure projects and offered cash handouts to citizens. While that actually caused their economy to grow very well, they expanded their GDP 2.3% in the year 2020. Most of the world was either seeing mixed results, very small positive growth, or outright negative growth. And as it stands right now, a lot of people were already predicting that the United States would be overtaken by China sometime after around 2030, which means that, you know, there was about a decade and a half or so left before the US would eventually have their economy overtaken by China's. But apparently the pandemic and the effects that have kind of been caused by it have gotten to the point where China is now accelerating the trend. It might be this decade. In fact, researchers at the Center for Economics and Business wrote in a December report that they expect China to overtake the United States 5 years earlier than they had previously thought. And it's gotten to the point that Chinese state media even are using this as propaganda, if you want to call it that, towards the Chinese people to, you know, help bolster the status of the government. But I mean, when their economy did grow, I don't know if it's necessarily propaganda, right? Like, China is just outright winning in this pandemic. The virus has fucked up the rest of the world, especially the United States, and it's causing China to be in a position where they can accelerate their growth even more and get another kickstart here to really lead into the next few decades. So with that being said, thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're brand new around here on the channel. Follow me over on Twitter and Twitch at @SubToOptimus. Make sure to check out Shop Opti down below. Thank you to my channel members. Your support helps my channel tremendously, Jesus. And until my next video, guys, this is Optimus, well, talking about China. and signing out. You've seen cool stuff in your life before, but you've never seen cool shit like this. Introducing Horser. Are we sure what it is? Not really, but is it interesting? Absolutely. Optimus, what do all these luxury cars and videos of horses and nature have to do with Horser? They're specially crafted in that order to make you want to buy shit. To make you think to yourself, oh, this Horser brand represents luxury and wealth and nature, and I need that. So fulfill the advertisement's role and go buy it. Horser. Keep it on you, or some shit like that.